I wish you'd stop being offended by me on a weekly basis.
Apparently, everybody's offended by you.
I know.
I'm not.
Good evening, everybody.
Stick around long enough, Tom.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, you haven't known me long enough. Good evening, everybody, and we're gonna get right into it. Welcome to the Fortean Slip. This is episode 150. For those of you who don't know, the folks with us tonight are Thom Reed and Melanie Kirchdorfer from the Unsolved Mysteries episode, the Berkshires UFO Incident, I believe it's called.
Episode 5, yeah.
Yeah. Now, I came across this as soon as the new episodes of Unsolved Mysteries came out. I started watching them, and I think I brought it to Steve's attention on the show early on, before it even got into your episode. Because I got sucked right into the first couple of episodes, how well they were done. I liked the fact that they were everybody was complaining that there wasn't a Robert Stack character to guide you through the whole thing. But I liked how they had the actual people telling the stories. And I really enjoyed those first couple of episodes, so I dove in pretty head first. And when I came across the Berkshires UFO episode, I was like, okay, here we go. Because with everything that comes across your plate that's either UFO, ghost, Bigfoot related, it's always made out to be far more fantastical than it really is. And so you always wind up getting this candy-coated version of the events. And I don't know if that was the case with what happened with your story, but from what I gathered from after watching it, I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel dirty after I watched the Berkshires UFO episode like I do with a lot of this stuff. A lot of this stuff, I start watching it and I'm like, ugh, who's making money off this shit? You know, whose pockets getting lined? That's what but when I got done with this one, that's not what I felt. I felt like, okay, these people had a really interesting experience, all at around the same time, all in or around the same location. And they didn't have the same experience, obviously, but they all had very similar experiences. And I was just like, wow. So I think it was a few weeks or a couple of weeks later, I'm looking at my Facebook feed, and I see Thom Reed in my Facebook feed, my news feed, and he's posting stuff for the Berkshires UFO thing. And I'm like, this can't be the guy. I'm not friends with the guy that was on the Unsolved Mysteries episode. So at first I kind of let it go by. And then a little later on, I messaged you, Thom, and, hey, and, we made that connection. And of course it was you. I was like, oh shit, I do know the guy. So, luckily we were able to put this together and make this happen. Because like I said, this is one of those stories that when I saw this and heard this, I instantly wanted to know more. So I'm not going to go into the story as it is that other people know. I just want to go into what happened to the two of you. On September 1st, 1969, there was is it safe to say an object traversed Massachusetts? Is that no?
Just the Berkshires.
Just the Berkshires. Okay. Right. So traversed over the Berkshires. And during the course of that time, the two of you had an experience.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So based on that, I'm gonna let Thom start. And when Thom's finished up, if Steve, if you've got any questions, Katie, I know Katie finished up you guys the episode today.
Yep, nice and fresh for me.
Yeah, in case she's got any questions, so we'll ask you any questions that we may have afterwards, Thom, and then we'll go into Melanie's experience.
Okay,
so
sure.
If you want to start wherever you feel comfortable with your story.
Okay, well, I think you hit a couple things pretty well there, Chris. It really wasn't sensationalized by any means. If anything, it was played down and watered down a lot. I think I'm not quite sure why it was so diluted, but there was so much more that they didn't say, which again is why we're here. We were September 1st. I'm not quite sure anyone really knows this or who knows it, but September 1st was actually a holiday. It was Labor Day. And one of the reasons it had so many witnesses back then is because there were so many people outside having barbecues. They were getting together with friends and family, and there were large groups of people outside. So more so than there normally would have been. And it was a hot night too. So I was leaving my family's diner in Sheffield, which Melanie had visited back as a child as well, and it was a main hangout for a lot of people. It had a jukebox, food, shakes, whatever, and it was one of the few places that people could really eat. So a lot of people hung out there, and one of the reasons it's gotten to the point that it has today. But again, it was about a little after. It was dusk, somewhere around 8:15, 8:20, somewhere in there. And we were heading home, and we were in a station wagon. My mother was driving a old Bel Air station wagon, and my grandmother was in the passenger seat. My brother was to my right. I was in the back seat behind the driver. And as we went through the bridge and started coming out the other side, like I've said a million times, I was giving my brother a candy. And that, my grandmother turned around to remind me that he was too young for the candy and he could choke. It was a big fireball, and he was only like 6.5 years old. And so when she turned around, she actually saw a sphere. And when I say a sphere, it really looked pretty much like a solid cue ball from a pool table, maybe, that was putting out some light of its own. But it was very in place. It wasn't bleeding a lot of light. It wasn't, it was concentrated.
So it didn't like wash everything over with light. It was just there.
Right. Now, when we first came through the bridge, there was some light coming through the bottom of the planks of the bridge. At least that's what my grandmother said. I don't remember that personally, but my grandmother talked about that. So it did emit light when it wanted to, or at times. And as it rose up from the banks, this is maybe 50 yards away from the Sheffield Bridge. And I never said it came out of the water. Some people say I said it came out. I didn't say that. I've said that it rose from the banks of the water. Why it was over the water is another topic, really, because there is something to the water in that area. I strongly believe that. And with that, I would say it was about 30 feet around. It was about the size of maybe 4 Volkswagen Beetles. It was pretty large. But then again, I was a child, so things seemed a little bigger. But it rose up to maybe 2 stories. And then there was rods of light. One came from the right side of it. One came from the left, about the middle of the thing. And they fired into the water, almost like, almost like beams, like lasers. I mean, it was very definitive. And so for a moment or two, it actually looked like an ice cream cone. So if you see the Ancient Aliens episode, they actually look almost like an ice cream cone.
Uh-huh.
And I don't remember how many fired. I just remember seeing a couple of them. And it didn't last very long, maybe, 2 or 3 seconds. And we were still moving when we saw this. It wasn't like we had stopped the car or anything yet. So I was looking out the back window. And so as we were moving forward, we really didn't lose track of it because it started to move in the same direction as our vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
So it really didn't stay behind us. It actually started to, go alongside the car and then behind a line of trees. And I would say at one point it probably got about 3 stories high. And those rods of light had gone back into it. And we were heading down this very bumpy dirt road, maybe.
So hold on, so the rods of light stayed outside of the craft for a bit.
It wasn't a craft. It was a sphere.
Or the I'm sorry, the sphere.
Yeah.
It
stayed maybe 3 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah. It either dissolved or went back into it. I don't really know what happened. They were just there 1 minute and gone the next.
Oh, okay.
And so as we went, this road used to be like for horse and buggy back in the day. I mean, it was a pretty rough dirt road. It had potholes, that kind of thing. Not as bad as it is now, but you know, it wasn't a road we weren't going very fast, maybe 20 miles an hour. And so as we continued down the road, my brother noticed another type of sphere off to the right, which was like orange. It was almost like a sun, but the center rolled a little bit. You could tell it was almost like I mentioned like an ocean wave or something. It seemed to have some movement inside of it. And that again was over water off to our right. So at first, both of these objects were over water. And so as we came down this road a little bit further, there was a telephone pole. My mother pulled the station wagon slowly off to the right to stop. And at that point, we felt like we were underwater. I've mentioned that too a million times. I don't know how else to describe it. All of a sudden, it just felt like we were submerged in the end of a deep swimming pool where there was like everything was muted. And we heard this tapping sound. I used to believe that it was the stones under the fender wall of the car, hitting the fender. You know, when you're in a pool, everything's like muted, but if someone hits the side of it or taps something, it echoes unbelievably.
Oh yeah.
That's what it was like. It was like the majority of the atmosphere or where we were was kind of solemn and we were becoming a little placid. And then you hear these noises, and everything seemed louder but muted at the same time. There was a separation in audio levels in the way you felt. It was either nothing or loud. There was nothing balanced, and I just remember that
it was just extremes.
Yeah, it was like this dynamic between being muted and then tap 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 tap, and that's what I remember from sounds. And then my mother had stopped. The car was still running. The headlights were on. And again, my mother was in the driver's seat. My grandmother was in the passenger seat. So my mother had a better view out the window like I did. Matthew was still trying to find his orange sphere thing. I remember he was like looking back and forth. Where is it? Kind of find everything because he couldn't really see the round white sphere we lost track of completely. And so we were actually stopped to look for it. That's what we were looking for. And then my mother just noticed that in the field, and as I did, and all of a sudden this thing just came to life. I mean, it was like this. It was about 100 yards long. It was looked like a turtle shell. And I say a turtle shell for a number of reasons. One, it looked like it had panels in it. It had lines, definitely had lines of some kind in it, which was what reminded me of the shell of a turtle shell. And then the center of it didn't come to a point. It was very fat in the middle. The top of it was very shallow in comparison to the width of the middle.
I kind of wondered after I heard your description of it that way if they kind of modeled the ship in the. You ever see the movie The Flight of the Navigator?
No.
The Disney movie. It seems very much like that. I'll see if I can pop it up while you're talking. Hold on just a second.
Okay. Now you saw the depiction that I have of it, right?
No.
Okay. Well, that depiction is very close, but it's a little off as well. But to get back to what was interesting about this was that the center of it, if the center of it was as fat as the top and bottom combined. So the middle of it took up the majority of the craft opposed to what was left on the top and what was left on the bottom. And let me see, what is it? Is that what you're showing me there?
That's kind of like what I imagined when I heard your thing of your description of it.
No.
Okay.
You should have a picture of it. It's on my website.
I can pop up your website. So you can go ahead and continue. I'll pop up your website and look for the.
So this is something I really feel is important because it's very different than what a lot of other people describe. The right side of it was not a solid color. It had different shades. There was like a copper, like a bronze and an orangey color to it, a pewter color to it. It was almost mixed. Like if you took a flamethrower, right, and you heated up some metal objects, you know how they kind of cool down at different temperatures, and you have the spottiness.
Mhm.
That's what it reminded me of. Thinking back, that's kind of what I would best way to describe it. And the left side of it, for whatever reason, was not anywhere. There it is, anywhere near as bright as the right side. So the right side of it was much more. It was like it was putting off its like an inner type of bleed or luminous to it, like the entire shell, just like that, kind of had a luminous to it in the dark itself. So when we, talk about it, we mentioned it had a little bit of a light underneath. It did, but it wasn't the light underneath it. It wasn't just the light underneath it that you could see. The shell itself put out some type of a, like this. It emitted. Now, whether or not the shell itself or the skin of it was actually those colors, or was that something that was coming through it, I don't really know. But you could see the thing definitively. And so we're looking at this thing for, I'm going to say it was probably 3 to 4 stories up, 150 yards away from us. It was about 100 yards. My son was a quarterback in high school, football quarterback. So I'm going to say it was about 100 yards, give or take. It was very big, much bigger than other people describe. And so to give you an idea where we were, we had this craft up maybe at the 10 o'clock to our car. The white sphere was back around, 7 o'clock. And then the orange sphere to our right was about 4 o'clock. So we were in the middle of a triangle of 3 objects. So when you watch Discovery Channel, they show the craft going over a car, which it didn't do. You look at Ancient Aliens, they show just a sphere. There were 3 objects, and we were in the middle of these 3 objects, which brings me to how or why I feel that that we suddenly felt very funky. That we felt. I think there was a communication going on between these 3 pieces. And with that said, everything went completely silent. And then there was a light that just engulfed our car. I could see everything. It's not like a dome light. I mean, this was just like something fired into our car. Everything you could see the dashboard. I could see the back of my mother's head. My grandmother, my brother. Everything was.
And just so everybody understands, this happened at night.
Yeah, this happened about 8:30.
Yeah,
about 8:30, and that was really the last thing we remember. Just this explosion of light and then bang, crickets, katydids, frogs, everything seemed to come alive again. Nothing was muted. Everything seemed normal, the normal sounds of a summer. And then bang, that was the last thing I remember being in the car. So that's what we encountered in Sheffield. That's about as good as I can describe it.
How long did the incident last altogether? Approximate.
Maybe 10 minutes at max.
That's actually quite a long time for
Well, you figure we were going about, it's a really good question, about 15 miles an hour out that bridge. We weren't going fast. That sphere followed us a good 50 yards or so at 15 miles an hour. Then we stopped. We were looking for the other object. Then we saw this and, had that weird.
Now, were you and your brother sitting in the back seat, or like most children who sat in station wagons in the back of the fucking station wagon?
No, we used to do that. It was really hot, so we had the windows open. It was like 85, 90 degrees that day.
Yeah. And
so at night, it was still probably pushing 80. Yeah, we had the windows up. We didn't have air conditioning in our car.
Right. Oh God, I don't think I've had air conditioning in a car until I was almost an adult.
I didn't have working air conditioning until this Kia I just bought.
You got a Kia?
Kia Soul. I love that car.
Yeah, good little car.
Yep.
So Kia's a good ride. So that's really it. I mean, we have we were gone for about I say about 2.5 hours, if not a little bit more. And when we came back in a car, returned to the car, however that happened, my grandmother was now in the driver's seat. My mother was in the passenger seat. I was unconscious. My brother was unconscious. The only one, or the first one to come to in the vehicle, was my grandmother. And she had taken the car down the station wagon down the end of the road. And she didn't usually drive. She typically didn't drive at all, but she took the car down, turned around, and went back to town for help. And we got into the Sheffield Green, and she had gone into Silks, which was right next to our diner, and went in for help. And when she got out of the car, she believes the door slammed, which, that noise, had me come to. And this was interesting because my mother, my brother, my grandmother, and I all came to at different times. It wasn't like this, like in 66 or 67, what we kind of recall back then. This took time. We kind of, it was almost, my brother once mentioned it, it was like a sodium pentothal type of thing. When you have surgery, you come out of surgery and the doctor's talking to you like right away, like you're supposed to be coherent immediately. And he's trying to tell you what's going on. You're going, yeah, but you're really not understanding. I'm sure you had a surgery.
Right. Oh, yeah.
It was kind of like that. We didn't come out of it like we were, sharp. We came out of it
slowly
in a funk. And my grandmother was walking into Silks, and I've mentioned before that she was kind of walking aimlessly. It was kind of like she was walking, but not really with a purpose, And I saw her, and I started calling her name, like Nana. And I followed her into Silks, and she walked right by the clerk and had gone to the back, and got caught up in bikes and strollers and that kind of thing. And and we walked back out, went to the car. My mother was conscious at that point, and we got back in the car, went home, and the next morning, the restaurant, or it was a restaurant, diner type combination thing. I had the stools and the counters, and everything started coming over WSBS radio. Witnesses were calling in. People were talking about it at the diner. It was chatter in our diner, and so the things changed a little bit. More people were talking about what they saw or what somebody else saw, and in school I sketched what I had remember seeing and taped it to the chalkboard in our classroom, and some other children had drawn things that they saw. So I believe that there was a lot more people that saw or witnessed this as children that ever came forward.
Right.
I think that the show from Unsolved and Ancient Aliens and Discovery and a couple other ones, even New England Legends, I think has fueled people to speak out. And I think that the park that they have in town now that has been a combination of a lot of support and backers, is reminding people that this isn't so taboo anymore, that they can talk about it. And so we're kind of hoping that, that'll continue.
Now, is your mom as outspoken as you about it? I noticed she was on the show.
She's only talked about this. She's talked about it, done a radio show in the past, or spoken to people, individually or in small family groups or settings, but she doesn't go public. It's not like we want to talk about this. I mean,
right.
We've got, professional careers and lives. This isn't like what we do,
Right.
But, we have something, I think, more important than a typical UFO story, right? I mean, we made United States history, and right. We lost my father over it. That's a long forgotten that he had this mentioned at the United Nations on October 2nd, 1992, and my father died on October 2nd. And so that's really why my brother and I started to really talk about it originally, because we knew that there was a connection, even though we couldn't prove it. At least we strongly believe that. We still believe that to this day. And so the drive behind this wasn't because we wanted attention to the subject or we wanted to walk around like rock stars, right? We're just, wanted to show, get that the point that, this is a serious topic. It needs to be handled more seriously. And when you lose a family member over it, who was political, my dad was a politician, he was an attorney, he was in office in Canaan, Connecticut, and always said that this was closer to home than most people thought, that there was a local presence that was involved. And of course, the mining for the atom bomb was mined in Canaan, Connecticut. And you've got NORAD towers in Pittsfield and Sikorsky and Electric Boat and Groton Naval Base and, General Electric. And you've got a lot of, Command Aerospace, a lot of manufacturing facilities. So I don't think it was ever a question as to, did Melanie, did some others actually see something? Or it was just a matter of what did you see? What was it? Right. So there's never been a question that this happened. Not like the Phoenix Lights. It's never been a question that something happened in Phoenix. It's just a matter of what was it?
Right.
And it's
I definitely would say this is not a question of did something happen on September 1st, 1969 in the Berkshires.
Yeah.
there's no question in my mind something happened.
Right. For a long time, though, people just like Jan Green said, a lot of people didn't talk about it because we did. I never had a problem talking about it. Once you jump in with both feet, you're in the pool, right? I mean, it's over. And so, but as far as my mother, she kind of thought things about.
You get talking about the hearing it on the radio and everything, and I go back to the show with the guy that they had from the radio station on, who was like, "God, I wish we still had those tapes."
Well, here's another thing, buddy. They believe they do still have the tapes, Chris. I spoke to Tom Jay's wife.
Yeah.
And, she believes that they might be in Arizona.
Huh.
And, that's not coming from me. That's coming from WSBS Radio.
That'd be really cool if they had them, because it's a little piece of history. If that information is out there, if we can hear like what people were saying that night, because you go by the episode, you go by the police reports that they were pulling up. According to the police, nothing was really going on. Yeah. That's what they say. I don't know what the story is there, and I'm not going to start trying to argue with them there. But at least if these tapes existed, or if they're out there and we can hear them, that's more proof positive of what was going on.
The Great Barrington Police Department, I think Melanie and I both would agree that they were hidden. I mean, there were reports. I mean,
that they just didn't report on.
Covered up.
No. They purposely buried them.
Well, it seems like a lot of they were saying in that Unsolved Mysteries episode that a lot of the newspaper articles are missing as well. They haven't found anything like.
We don't have a newspaper. We didn't have a newspaper back then that would have carried.
So that kind of makes sense then.
I mean, let me ask you.
There's no local paper.
If I said to you, Steve, I want you to make a report to the newspaper that you saw a UFO in your backyard, do you think they'd run an article? So everybody's article runs crap anymore. I can't. If anything, it's all fake news. I mean, you can't believe anything anymore.
Oh, I agree with that 100%.
Like paper in my backyard and say, "Hey, man, I saw a UFO. Can you send
here's the thing, though.
Here?
Here's the problem with that.
Yeah,
is that people put up too much bullshit. I mean, I remember in the early days when Steve and I met. We met on this Bigfoot group, in this Bigfoot group on Facebook, and there was this other group that we were constantly making fun of called Facebook Finds Bigfoot. And they would put up any video that came across their table and say, "This is definitively Bigfoot. We can, identify it on 10 points of whatever the fuck they would say." And just
10 points,
it's just some stupid thing, but we saw so much crap.
Yeah. Well, 1969, we only had the radio station, right, Mel? We didn't really have anything else, and the radio station was getting most of the calls for the reports.
They had the Berkshire Courier back then, but Santi Galata, who was the Sheffield police officer, he recorded it. It was recorded in Sheffield. So why did the smaller police department record it, but not the larger one?
Right, because I remember them saying that there was one area where they did have a report.
Oh, that's Sheffield. That's where we were.
Yeah, but the guy that was over the one that they showed in the episode where he was like, "Well, here's a a call for that. He was a wicked dick about it too.
Well, you know what? Melanie can tell you a lot about that if you want to talk about that now.
Was there ever?
I don't think it's something that we should discuss until we have more
Information.
Until we have more information, Tom.
Then I'll say it because I don't really give a rat's ass.
I gotta live here, Tom.
Yeah. Be nice, Tom.
All right.
I gotta ask.
We need more ammo, Tom.
That ringed binder was a ringed binder, and pages easily came out of that.
Sure.
We gotta have more ammo, but we will get it. Trust me.
Was Project Blue Book ever involved in this one?
We got a classification, but it never made it in because it was September and Project Blue Book shut down about 2 months.
That's right. They did shut down in '69.
Yeah.
My mother had a sighting in '65, Erie, Pennsylvania. If you know where that's at, she lived there. Erie, and it's very similar. The shape of the craft that she described. Of course, she never reported to anybody, but it did make the newspaper because other people saw it that night, and it was a Project Blue Book. In fact, it's one of the unknowns. But the craft shape was very similar to what you're saying.
Really?
However, it didn't have lines in it. It was completely smooth, and she said it didn't emit any light, but hers was in broad daylight. So it maybe in the daylight it would be a different type of craft. But when Chris showed that picture, that's exactly what she's described to me as what the shape of the craft was. So I found that to be very interesting.
Common craft back in the day.
Yeah.
Steve, can I ask you a question? Was it over water by any chance where your mother saw it?
Her sighting, no. Her sighting, in fact, she lived on a farm, and they were coming back from eating dinner or something. I can't remember what she said where they were coming back from. My grandfather was in the car. My uncle, both my uncles, my mother, and my grandmother. So we're coming back from a family event somewhere, and it was over the cows. And she said it was just hovering there over the cows. It wasn't doing anything to the cows, at least that she could see. Right. And then it would slowly go up in the air and just get smaller and stop, and then go up, smaller, stop. And then finally it did that like 4, 5, 6 times, and then it disappeared. But she said it was really quick. The
sphere actually did that. It would jump like immediately. Like you couldn't even barely tell how it did it. But it's here, and then it's like here, and then it's here, then it's here. It didn't, would smooth a lot of the time, but it would dart. Yeah.
Then later that night, on the beach in Erie, at Presque Isle, if you ever want to look it up, Presque Isle UFO Incident, it actually landed on the beach, allegedly, obviously. And there was a big case about it. There's pictures, and it was one of Project Blue Book's unknown ones. And it's a really interesting story if you get into it.
I'd like to look at that one. Yeah. Maybe give me information again.
Sure.
Okay.
But so when you described the craft, it brought that all back to me about what my mother has said to me over the years. And my mom's a devout Christian, and she's not going to go on an interview and tell anybody.
My mother is her bachelor's in ministry. I'm sorry, her master's in ministry. Yeah.
My mom's not, and my mom couldn't lie if you paid her, so.
Well, here's the thing.
I'm a skeptical dude. I believe my mom.
The thing about the outside of this thing, and I mentioned the lines and the squares, like I said, I don't know if that was something that was kind of projected through it because it was putting out a light.
Right.
Theoretically, it could have been very smooth, very similar to what your mother saw, right?
Right.
So I don't know if what I was seeing was actually the shell itself or something that was bleeding through the shell that gave that appearance.
And like I said, she saw hers in broad daylight. So It wasn't, they wouldn't have, even if it was emitting light or changing colors or whatever it would have done, she may not have seen something like that.
Right. Was it like a bronze or
silver?
Was silver? Like a pewter maybe, or shiny silver?
Very shiny, she said.
Okay, this wasn't shiny.
Like a polished silver. Yeah.
Okay. The other thing about Mel and I were both in a vehicle of 4 people. Mm-hmm. We were both near water, and we were both gone at the same time.
No, I have had a couple sightings myself. One of them is reminiscent of the orange sphere that you're talking about.
Okay.
In my case, it was very slow, and it just moved very slow, almost like a hot air balloon slow. That
Mm-hmm.
My oldest son, and I saw it, he was picking them up from his grandmother's. Now, I live right on Lake Erie, so there's water involved. But where it seemed to hover and stop was above a stream, not a very big stream. And then a few years later, I had on two separate occasions, some weird, I don't know if they were UFOs, but one of them seemed like the lights on a aircraft, and it was coming straight at us. I mean, literally straight at us. We thought it was going to crash right into us. And then all of a sudden it blinked out. That was over water. And then my son saw that one too, my older son. And then the third one was two crafts at the same time, and they were changing colors. It was really weird, like green, yellow, red, and they were kind of fluttering around in the air like this, and then they disappeared. And that was over water. So most of my sightings were all of my sightings were over water, but my mom's was not. So I don't talk about these things a lot because I can't prove what any of them were. But these are things that I physically actually saw, Chris, instead of heard this time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know. And I have a sighting that I told Thom about off air the other day, but it's one of those things where it could have very well been something completely different. So most times when I describe it, I do it from a point of rationality. I think like this could have been something else, but it could have been this. So I don't try to bullshit people.
I don't. That's why I don't talk about it a lot either, because I don't know.
But there's a good segue. The fact that you guys both have had a very similar experience. You're both in cars. So Melanie, if you'd like to take us through what happened to you, and the time frame, about what time did this happen? Because you say it happened to both of you at the same time. About what time exactly was it?
Well, my incident would have happened earlier than Tom's because I was in Great Barrington. He was down in Sheffield.
Okay.
So, first of all, my incident was actually different because I did not have the support system that Thom had with his family. I actually was told that this didn't happen to me. And then 2 years ago, my mother called me. I was told my whole life that this was an imagination, but yet they were with me the whole time. And then 2 years ago, I got a phone call from her that I needed to go to the Historical Society and tell the Historical Society my story and what happened to us. And I said, "What are you talking about? You told me that this incident never occurred." And she goes, "Oh, well, it really did. I was just trying to protect you."
Oh.
It's like, what? It was like being brainwashed for all those years. I was 60 years old, 61 years old. And then she's telling me that it was all in my head, but it really wasn't in my head. So it was being brainwashed my whole life and then trying to unbrainwash me. So that being said, I really had no support, but I knew it had happened, but she told me it didn't happen. And so I knew that it happened.
Not to derail you or stop you, but is there a reason that stuff isn't in the episode, or is is there a reason that like the fact that people tried to hide it? Because I didn't hear any of that.
I don't know. I talk about it all the time. I do it on my interviews, and I never ever have been paid for anything. I never ask for money.
Right.
And in fact, when I found out from Thom that my mother was spoken to in 2013 from people in Oregon about this. And I said, "Are you kidding me, Thom?" And I didn't even know that people were talking to my mother about this. I said, "Why did she keep this from me?" I found out from Thom about this.
Her family members were talking about this at the same time. They were telling her not to worry about it, not to give it a whole lot of thought.
Because this has been happening to me since I was 4 years old. And they kept telling me I was crazy, that I was nuts.
I've got to say, Melanie, that in my mother's instance, my grandmother denied it until the day she died, although she was there and she saw it. My grandfather would not talk about it at all. He would not deny it when you asked him, but he would not talk about it. And my uncle one uncle hasn't talked about it at all. The other uncle would deny it for years and years. He later went on to work for the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and big places like that. He finally admitted, like 2 years ago, that yes, it did happen. So
my mother, like your mom, is very religious. It's a religious thing. I really believe that. They're afraid. What will the neighbors think?
Mm-hmm.
And because of it, I actually shelled out a lot of money before I even came forward to go to the Historical Society. I said, I got to get this figured out in my head because I was traumatized my whole life because of this. My sister knew about it and she always watched my back. My husband knew about it and my very close friends knew about it and what my parents had done to me. I went to a professional PTSD person for months, and went through a person that works with soldiers, police people for a post-traumatic stress disorder, and went through hypnosis. And you have to go for 5 weeks and they prepare you even before they'll hypnotize you. It's not a one-time thing. You've got to go for weeks on end before they'll even hypnotize you. And then I finally said, okay, now I know exactly what happened. And I remembered it, but I wanted to know the facts. Needless to say, my relationship is very severed with my mother because of all the lying that she did. And
it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's very unfortunate, but I don't trust her because of it.
Understood. My mom and my grandmother had relationship issues, and I think a lot of it dealt with things like that because my grandmother would just tell her it never happened, and that kind of thing. Now, not just that. There was a lot of other strains, so you're not alone. You're not alone. I just want to let you know.
Because of telling my mother that this thing was happening to me, and my sister said, well, remember Melanie, which when you go to school, she was so traumatized over it. But that being said, by the time I was 12 years old, my sister and I, we were working at the Mahawi Theater. Ironically, Thom worked there too, and I found that out later. And we did not want to go that night out to get ice cream, but my parents were insisting on it. By that time, we were very rebellious, my sister and I, against my parents. We just wanted to go. Back then in 69, my sister was 14, I was 12. When you were 12 and 14 back then, people were smoking cigarettes. Kids were smoking cigarettes. It wasn't bad for you back then. And
oh God, so I was smoking cigarettes at that age, Melanie.
Well, we were back then. We were. You'd sneak it from your friends' parents, and you'd go up to Penny Rack and you'd smoke a cigarette. And it was a big deal. That's what we wanted to do after working all weekend. We had to pay board even. So the last thing we wanted to do was sit in a car after working all weekend and go for ice cream. It was like send our little brother instead. But we had to go, and we went. And we were sitting there at Lake Mansfield, not wanting to be there. And the next thing we know, this bright light comes around. And we look up, there it was. And my father was like, holy shit. And my mother is like, Joey, just stop. He started following it, and we started screaming. And I knew they were coming for me again. I just knew it. And my sister and I were screaming. I can remember clearly, and I asked my mother, why did I smell wool? I remember the smell of wool. And she said it's because he had a wool blanket, and I remember it in the car. He had a wool army blanket in the car, and it's because we were put our faces down in the car. And I remember that being one of the last things in the car, smelling that wool army blanket because of putting our heads down, my sister and I. And then I don't remember anything else in the car. I just remember him chasing it and everybody screaming in the car. And then I remember levitating over Berkshire Heights and not being able to move. You can just move your eyes. And being stuck in this levitation position. And then being on the ship. And it was all metallic on the ship, like
the interior?
Yes, it was almost an institutional metallic.
Yep.
And that's
Would you
all
would
I
you
remember up
would,
there,
would you say
except
that will you say it was almost institutional? Would you say that it was like sanitary?
yes.
Okay.
But I don't remember seeing any of those little gray men that I would see when I was younger,
Right.
because I think I was so terrified that I couldn't move. I couldn't move my head, and it was just my eyes that I could move. But then I remember later being in another room where there were a lot of young children, young people.
Mm-hmm.
Other people have quoted me on news channels or in newspapers that I was 14 and they were classmates of mine. That's not true. I never said that.
Okay.
These were children that I didn't know. I didn't know any of these children. And then they would just one by one, they would just disappear. They were just gone. And then the next thing I remember, I woke up on Lake Mansfield on the beach of Lake Mansfield.
Outside of the car.
No, the car was gone. Nobody was there. I was alone on the beach, and I was just laying on the beach with stomach pains. I had bare feet. I had cut off shorts on. I can remember I had it was a sweatshirt that was a 3/4 length sweatshirt, and it was kind of a short sweatshirt because back then that's what we wore.
Mm-hmm.
They were like short, a short sweatshirt with short shorts and bare feet. And I had to walk back to my house, which was not very far. It was like a 5-10 minute walk. And ironically, my mother, the back door was unlocked and they were all sound asleep. And to this day, they don't remember driving home. My sister, they watched the Netflix show. And my mother keeps saying, how did we get home that night? How did we get home that night? And Janie goes, they don't remember. None of them remember even driving home that night. And the good thing about it is my mother said to my sister, I'm glad that Melanie's finally able to tell her truth as to what happened that night. So she's finally getting it that she shouldn't have done what she did.
Now, do you both feel like that the episode, for all of its faults, portrayed the incident well?
No. I think it showed the flight pattern well. I was grateful that Melanie was able to get in it, and my mother, and that Eddie Galata. But as far as a few other, I think I missed the boat on a lot of things. Originally, when I started filming with them, I met with Terry, and the owner, the franchise owner. And we went to breakfast, and we went through the whole stack of paperwork that I had, letters from the lieutenant governor, letters from the governor, letters from the Historical Society, a packet of papers that my dad had when this case was mentioned at the United Nations. It talks about 33-426 and Muhammad Ramadan, the president of the Parapsychology Society, and our attorney, Robert Blechman, who discussed this at the UN, and Stanton Friedman was there, and, the whole bit. And, the letters that are the research that the Roswell Research Center did, Roswell Museum, and a lot of this was supposed to be in the episode. And I think it was, I don't think it was, Melanie and I are part of a very solid incident, UFO incident, or however you want to word it. And I think it sold it a little short. You're mentioning earlier when we first came on that a lot of these shows sensationalize everything and play it up, and it takes away from it. Well, it's also true in reverse. If you don't show what you have, that also takes away from it.
Right.
And so this case had so much that was to be mentioned in this episode. And the only reason my mother even did the show was because we were promised that they would show information about her late husband and how this went before the United Nations. I mean, that was agreed upon, and it was not in the show. So I also realized that there's a lot of people, edit these things. It was filmed and shot, by Unsolved, but it was also picked up by Netflix. There was a lot of people involved in this, Bob, Doug, Terry, Cindy, guys from Netflix, and I just think it was unfair to take out the substance. I know I do know for a fact they wanted to focus on flight pattern. They wanted to focus on that particular night. Going through Pittsfield, going through Stockbridge, Lake Mansfield with Melanie, and it's on its way to Sheffield, and it was also supposed to it went into Canaan, and Judge Titus, he witnessed it in Canaan, so it didn't stop in Sheffield, So I think they did a pretty good job for 39 minutes, but I think if they had just put in the extra 10 minutes like the other shows had, it would have had a lot more substance. And I think,
because it was a shorter episode than the other ones.
Yeah, they cut 10 minutes out of it.
Yeah. So, Melanie, do you feel the same way?
Well, there was a lot more. There was a lot that was cut out that we discussed, that we talked about, and I think it would have made for a better show. But I think it was a good show. I'm happy that I did do it. I think that Thom and I are finding a lot more out about Berkshire UFO. A lot of people have come forward. I'm finding out that I had a classmate that had the same incidences as me growing up on a street over. It's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
None of us wanted to talk about any of this.
Yeah.
We're finding out a lot of people. A friend that Thom went to school with the same night saw 6 UFOs in Stockbridge. He's younger than me. I know him. He's a friend of Tom's and my husband Henry's, John. He saw 6 of them, he was telling us, the same night, right in Stockbridge. Wow. So to me, it just verifies that, oh my God, all this has been happening right around us, and none of us wanted to talk about it. We were all afraid to talk about it because we were if I talked about it, I was being punished for it.
Well, that's the thing that caught me with the episode was, here's this group of people that while they're, they might have known each other peripherally. My whole take on it was, in 1969, you didn't have the social media you have today.
Right.
You didn't have the connections between people that you have today. God, I remember my fucking grandmother. She still had the fucking crank phone on her wall when I was a kid in the 80s. She would go into the back room. She would crank up the phone. She would pick up the thing, and the operator would have to connect her to the number. She still had one of those fucking phones. So, I mean, my whole take on it was, in 1969, you all didn't have like all kinds of connections to be able to to call somebody. You had to catch them at home.
Right.
I remember when I was a kid, I had a pen pal in Washington State across the country. And I'd get 3 or 4 letters from this kid a year. And we would just back and forth talk about our lives. That was the type of connections you would have with people. So when I heard about this and that all these things are so similar, and you've all had, and like I said, not the same experience. Melanie didn't have the same experience as you, and you didn't have the same experiences as somebody else, et cetera, but it's similar.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I found that very interesting.
Melanie, do you mind if I ask a question, Chris?
No, go for it.
Carolyn Cookwary in the chat had a very good question. She said, clearly, and this is for Melanie, you have a lot of emotional scars from this. I'm sure you both do. But she wanted to know if there was any physical scars or anything like that. And that was directed to Melanie, but Thom can answer as well. Was there any physical, manifestation of this event?
When I woke up on the beach, I had really horrible stomach pains. And right, I remember as a child, my father was always bringing me to the doctors for stomach issues. And I recently had some tear duct surgery done, and my eye doctor could not believe how scarred my eyes, the scar tissue and my tear ducts were. And he made comment about how I had really the tear ducts in my eyes were so scarred. And of course, I didn't say to him, well, it's probably because I was abducted by aliens, because he would have looked at me like I had 3 heads, I'm sure.
Right, sure.
You just don't go advertising things like that. But I do have a lot of scarring in my eyes, in my tear duct section.
Was there any other reports from any of the other witnesses or anything of any physical stuff that you guys know?
Oh, I've got scars.
Do you?
Yeah. My brother did. My brother had 2 puncture wounds behind his right ear and 2 on his chest, which were connected to the thymus gland, the gland that produces the T cells for the body's immune system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've got, I don't know if it means anything, but I've had these circle scoop marks in my arm since I can remember. I don't know if that means anything. I'm sure you've heard of that, right?
I've heard of it, sure.
I mean, I don't know if I can even see it, but I've got, where is it? Let me see.
I don't know if I can. I can
Yeah,
pop you up.
Yeah, it's bad, but it's lighting. But I got one there, and I've got actually one here. So I've got matching scoop marks.
That would have happened ages ago, right?
Oh, I've had these since I was a child, since
so
the 60s, and something else. Everybody says, "Oh, we didn't talk about it." I did talk about it. I was the one who did talk about it. And I think because one of the reasons because of this too was that I wasn't like born in Massachusetts. I moved there when I was, from New York afterwards, and so I think because we had the diner and it was social and people hung out there, and I wasn't actually from Massachusetts. I think that's why I did talk about it and why why it remained alive. Why it. A lot of other people didn't, and I think after we were crucified for it, or had the issues or problems or the friction that was created over it. Sure, we kind of said, well, maybe it's not a good idea anymore, but we were the family that talked about it the most, and so yeah, I've never stopped talking about what happened. There's no, for me, I've always felt differently about the topic anyway. When this happened and I was young, I mean, I was so fascinated in some respects. I wasn't as traumatized by it as some people. I think I was more bothered and the issues that I had to overcome, those hurdles, that beating down, if you will, the ridicule, kids can be mean, and I think that when I was young, it was more what we had to deal with after the fact than what that night, how that night impacted us. Now, sure, if you're sitting there and you're seeing a craft like that, I don't care who you are, you're going to be absolutely memorized by this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was maybe, if it happened later, like now, I would be thinking, oh my God, what does this really mean? I'd be thinking of all the, are we going to be under attack? All these things that when you're 9, you're not thinking of those things. You're not wondering what the repercussions are of what you're seeing. You're not going in that direction. You're just focused on the thing and you're memorized by it. You're lost in it. You're like, it's unbelievable. But you're not looking at, what the significance or why it's here.
Mm-hmm.
And,
yeah,
so,
that's like the incident where what I saw, it took me until I was older and I had seen an actual B-52 doing a fake bombing run at an air show that I was able to see, oh yeah, an aircraft can be flying by you and look like it's moving slow. Like I was like, oh, that makes sense as to why I saw it. That I could have seen something this way instead of thinking I was seeing an alien craft, which it may have been. I don't fucking know, and I don't try to make it out to be that it was or that it wasn't. I just will tell people, hey, when I was a teenager. I was walking home. I looked up. I saw this big triangular looking thing that blacked out the sky and moved really slow and made no noise. That's all I can tell you. You know, and
I'll tell you, I don't care who you are. Anytime you have an incident, because everybody here has had some sort of incident like this, it impacts your life for the rest of your life. It's why I'm into what I'm into. It's why I do the show with Chris, because of the things I've seen. And I didn't know that my mom had seen it prior to my first sighting, obviously, but because I told my mother about it, that's when that all came out. So now I feel so bad for Melanie, because at least I had somebody to talk to who went through some similar experience. This is before the internet anyway, you know, so you didn't have the chat rooms or the Facebook groups or whatever, YouTube even. So at least I had my mother, and I could bounce ideas off of her, what she thought and what I thought, and somebody who would talk to me about it. So
Carolyn says New Englanders aren't exactly known for being super open-minded and friendly. Sad. I tend to agree, Carolyn. I've lived in Maine my whole life.
And Carolyn, for the record, grew up in the Berkshires, Norfolk, Connecticut, she says.
Yeah. Okay. Well, she's right. I mean, it's very cliquey.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, we were outsiders too, so we weren't in a clique. And so, yeah, we were outsiders the whole time. And we ended up leaving. And now, you know, I talk to Melanie now and then, and she's like, do you remember so-and-so, or do you remember this place? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I left in 76. You know what I mean? So it was a long time ago, but I go back to Sheffield. It really hasn't changed much. I mean, it looks pretty much the same as it did 50 years ago. Some of the names have changed, but I think one of the other things that, you know, Melanie and why we're lucky here in some degree, and, you know, that the radio station that broadcasted is still in the same building under the same call letters. Our diner is still there. You know, and I don't think Melanie and I grew up a mile and a half from each other. We didn't even know it. We didn't even know.
That's true. It's true. In fact, I used to go into his diner as a kid. We used to ride our bicycles. The boyfriend that I had at the time, he's no longer here with us, but we used to ride our bicycles down there. I could talk to him about this. And we used to stop in there, the diner, and pick up takeout food and go swimming at Umpachini Falls, or there was a bridge that we used to swim at in Ashley Falls. And we would stop and get takeout food at his diner.
Oh.
You know, and it's something else I might throw in here real quick is that there were, and correct me if I'm wrong, Melanie, but there were some other kids our age that kind of you knew that they had seen something or they were part of what we were, and you had the like I said, it's cliquey, right? The woman who messaged you, you know, it can be cliquey there. But, you know, there were times in the diner that you could just look at someone else, another child come in and see in their eyes that they also had something happen, but you didn't really want to ask. And so, you know, I don't really.
Man from California, the musician who's been traumatized by what he saw. He was living here. He saw something in 1970. He was the same thing. It was up again on Berkshire Heights. When he ever said it was Berkshire Heights, I couldn't believe it. He found me, his sister found me through Messenger after she saw Netflix, and she said, will you please talk to my brother, because everyone thinks he's crazy. And he never even heard about Berkshire Heights. And when he ever told me that his incident took place up at Berkshire Heights, I was floored to hear about it. But he would never talk about it on a radio show or anything, because I think I'm the one that he's spoken to about it.
A lot of people just, and I don't blame them either, because the minute you start talking about it, and the minute I have family members, because I do this show, they're like, oh, you believe in that wacky woo-woo Bigfoot bullshit. And I've had to tell them many, many times, listen, you assholes, I don't believe in this shit like hook, line, and sinker. Like, pay attention. Listen to a couple of my shows before you go. But they're just like, you fucking believe in the UFO, woo-woo, fucking Bigfoot bullshit.
I get it too. And
yeah, let me mention this too, if I can, before I forget. Okay, is that all right, Chris? Can I jump in for a second? All right. And Melanie, please, this area is not like a one-time thing. There is so much activity in and around the Berkshires that it's absolutely astounding. Like what Melanie said, there was a lot of activity. What was the name of that mountain? What was that?
East Mountain.
East Mountain. There's a lot of activity even to this day in Sheffield. They have pictures of these spheres still over cornfields. There was crop circles in 2013. There were crop circles in 2014. There's sightings in and around the monument, where the monument was at the park in Sheffield.
Cherry Hill, up on Cherry Hill in Stockbridge. Yep. I have photographs of UFOs that a friend of mine took up on Cherry Hill. Great photographs, by the way.
Yeah, and 70
really good photos.
You know, a bunch of us at school that I don't talk about this either. I was leaving Searles Middle School, and I was up near Dewey Park, you know, or where Dewey School is. You know, there's a park up there, and we all saw this sphere, just like I mentioned earlier. There was a sighting of what looked like a cigar-shaped craft back in, I was in 6th or 7th grade at the time. I mean, this is an active area. And so when the Historical Society approached me about doing something with this, one of the things that they had asked a lot of people that were witnesses to activity was, well, was it September 1st, 1969? Because if it wasn't, then it really didn't add anything to that particular date that they were focused on. And that's kind of how the whole monument came to be. People wanted to contribute something, even though their testimonies wouldn't be accepted for that reason. But again, there's a lot going on in that area. And I spoke to Melanie about this, and I think we both kind of agree that, you know, there is something that's attracting them to the area. And it does seem like the majority of the sightings are all over water, too. The Housatonic is terribly polluted. When this case, the Reed case went in before the United Nations on October 2nd, 1992, it was in support of the Hudson River Valley sightings, which were over the Hudson River. And then, of course, there was also, you know, the fact that our car and what happened to us, the wildlife, how things kind of changed around our vehicle, how it altered whatever this was had an effect on life itself outside the vehicle. And that went in support of Cash and Landerman in Texas. So, you know, whatever is happening there, and again, this, you know, Melanie and I had experiences long before 69. And that's why I'm bringing this up, was that I don't think her and I were the only ones to also have had an experience before 69. Right. And you could see it in the kids' eyes. You could see it in school. Like, it was almost like when 1969, when this happened, so many other people saw it that for a brief time, other kids were finally drawing and taping their drawings on the bottom of this chalkboard at Sheffield Center School. I mean, there must have been 15 or 20 of these sketches on this chalkboard. And then, you know, of course, and afterwards, and after the picking or whatever you want to word it, a lot of people clammed up again and stopped talking about it. But there was a time in 69, for a short time, you know, that people were talking more about this. But then, of course, like you said, even your own family members can poke fun. Unfortunately, Melanie went through hell with that, you know, and I feel really sorry for her for that, because I did have family, you know, I did. I could talk to my mother and my grandmother, and collectively, sometimes that was enough, you know. But at least you had that hug when you needed it, you know. You had that kiss on the forehead, and it's going to be okay, and you know, keep this between us for now. But at least we had a little bit of support. And unfortunately for Melanie, she didn't.
I had my sister. I thank God for my sister. I don't know what I would have done without my sister. She always watched my back.
I would say, though, a lot of abductees, a lot of UFO witnesses, Bigfoot witnesses, whatever, don't have any support. And that is unfortunate, because it is, for people who haven't seen these things, it is hard to believe. And so.
And it makes it hard to deal with when you're, you know, when you feel like you're on an island by yourself. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You know, when you come out with this stuff, or you know, you've got experiences that you've been through, or things that you've done that you know, you go to talk to people about, and they don't have any frame of reference. so you just immediately feel like this outsider. And a lot of times people do. They immediately go to that lowest common denominator. Like I don't look at my family members who do that to me like those, you pieces of shit or anything like that. They're just poking fun. Those guys, they're just having fun, because when it comes down to it, if there was an incident, if something had happened, if they'd seen it with me, they'd be the first ones to say, yeah, we saw it with you. That happened. I mean, my cousin Greg, who gives me all kinds of shit about this show and the stuff that I talk about, he came on the show to talk about an incident where we ran into wild dogs in the woods. And him and I are very, very lucky to be alive. We were basically walked out of the woods by a pack of wild dogs. And the way that all went down, it's very, to tell that to somebody, they'd be like, bullshit, you're full of it. But, he was the first one. The guy that was the first one to sit there and poke fun at me for talking about Bigfoot and UFOs was the first one to be right there to be like, no, that shit happened. So but when it comes to these things, Steve's right. And people bail, because a lot of people, here's the problem with human beings. Human beings want to be on the winning side. And they want to be on the winning side first. They don't want to jump ship when they know the other side's going to win. They want to be able to say, I was on the winning side from the beginning. And they just look at people like us who have these, these experiences like we're fucking wackos, because that's the easy way to go with it. It's easy to say that. Oh, you believe in that? You're fucking full of shit. That's the easy route.
Sure. People are weak.
Yeah. And I just, it sucks. When I hear stuff like that, it sucks.
They'd rather blend in than stand for something.
Well, I think on the other side of things, it's easier to deny something that's actually happened to you than it is to come out and say it. And I think that's probably what happened more with my grandmother, with my mom, and perhaps Melanie's mom. It was just easier for my grandmother to deny the whole thing. Because, it is an unbelievable situation. And even though she was right there to see it, never could admit it till the day she died, So.
And there's so many things that, I know of, that people in my family know of, that they would never admit to, things that have happened.
Yeah.
It's not indicative of any one person, but I think the experiences that people go through, like what Melanie went through, is her own thing. Like she went through something where, like, and sorry for that, Dia. That's awful that your parents did that shit. I think to some degree, we all have that thing with people in our lives where they're like, they want to put that thing down, or they want to drive that down, push it away. That goes in the closet. That's that thing we don't talk about. Hey, shut that door. Don't let that shit out.
It's safer.
Well, fortunately, my sister and Henry, my husband, said, okay, it's time to tell your truth. And they're the ones. And Thom also makes a really good point. He said, you know what, Melanie? We're okay. We're alive. Nothing really, really horrible has happened to us. We're here today.
Yeah.
And I thought about that one night, and it's true. We're okay. I still sleep sitting up with my dogs around me. I'm still traumatized, but he's right. I listen to his words and what he has to say.
Yeah.
It is very true. We're okay. We're alive.
And there's no shame in that either, Melanie. Like, there's no shame in the fact that you have, you have to take care of you, that you have to make sure that you're caring for yourself because of the things that have happened to you. I'm a drug addict. I'm a recovering drug addict. I got sober in 2011, and I from pain pills, and I carry that shit with me every fucking day. So there's no shame in that. None whatsoever.
If I can jump in here too for a second. with respect to Melanie and I and a few others, I've always looked at the bright side of things, right? I'm a half full type of person, and there were times when I was, I think I was a lot more shook up than I want to admit sometimes, that I admit to myself because I try to be a strong person, but no, I when I talk about this topic, I get to a certain point and I know where to cut it off, because if I go too far, it kicks old feelings up, even as many years as it has been. So I know myself, and I know where to say, okay, I'm not gonna go there. Just like an attack or whatever with somebody, you can talk about certain things. You get to a certain point, you're like, I'm good, right? Well, so with that, I cut things off and I look at the bright side, right? Earlier, Steve had mentioned that you can't go through something like this without having it affect the rest of your life, and he's absolutely true about them. It's absolutely, there's no way you can't experience something this extraordinary, be part of something like this, and have it not affect your life. But it actually affected my life in a positive way. I said to my mother, I want a camera, because if I ever see this thing again, I want to get a picture of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that drove my career. I ended up becoming a fashion photographer in South Beach and the whole bit. And who knows what I would have been if I hadn't asked for that first little Polaroid camera, and we moved from that area to Hartford, a bigger city, which offered more opportunities. So if I look at why, the fact we left and what I did for a living and how things progressed, maybe if this never had happened, I'd still be living in Sheffield. I don't know. Maybe I would have been a farmer. I don't know what would have happened. So,
our life experiences definitely shape us.
Well, I mean, Melanie's done well with her life and everything, and she's got a terrific husband and the whole bit. And so who knows? But I'm just saying, I look for the positives. I say to myself,
I agree.
You have to, right? We can dwell on it all day long. And I'll tell you, there were times at 2:23, 2 o'clock in the morning. There's certain times a day that I'd wake up in the middle of the night and not know why and kind of freak out. And my mother, I'm going to tell you this, I very seldom ever mention this. I was so shaken by this that I used to sleep with a fork when I was a kid. And there was a documentary that was done a long time ago that actually ran with this. But my mother came in twice, check on us. And she startled me, and I jumped up and actually stabbed my mother in the face with a fork. And that's how shaken I was. And I don't talk about that much, but to hide a lot of that part of my experience.
It's not easy.
Right.
I still have nightmares. H wakes me up from my.
Listen, I still. We as human beings, we're fragile, okay? Like, I still think about times like when I lost my job 10 years ago. Like, and how much of a douchebag I felt about that. Forget about, like, the really personal, shitty stuff that I think about all the time. Like, we carry shit with us. And we carry it for a long time. And I think the hardest thing for us to do is to put shit down. To just let it go and walk on.
I gotta say, I'm close into thinking as Thom is, because me, Chris, I put a positive spin on everything. And but I find myself fortunate to be able to have seen the things I've seen. The crafts. How many people get that? How many people get that opportunity? Right. Well, luckily, I've actually had 4 sightings. The first one I was 7 years old. The rest of them I was an adult, so I had some sort of context to put it into, instead of what you guys went through when you were really young. It had to have been a little bit tougher, obviously. But yeah, I put a positive spin on everything. I wouldn't know Chris if I hadn't gone through this stuff. I wouldn't be doing this show. I would have, a lot of the things I've done in life, I wouldn't have. The funny part is, because I got into the Bigfoot stuff with Chris, I started getting online and posting about it. And that's how I met my wife, actually. I don't even know if Chris knows that.
Oh, yeah.
But it was through a Bigfoot story that I was doing. And she had no interest in Bigfoot, but she thought it was interesting that I was into it. Now,
and
I knew
to rewind my whole
time,
thing too, like, I got into the whole Bigfoot thing and met Steve because I got sober. Yeah. And when I got sober, when I got sober, I decided that I was going to just eliminate all the people in my life because everybody that I knew was a drug addict. So I just retreated to an online life. So I started making friends on Facebook in this Bigfoot group, and that's how I met Steve.
Yeah.
So it's just
See,
it's weird.
Tom, we met each other through this.
Right. I met Melanie.
Yeah.
I
So
met
so
her in person, but
it's weird how this stuff can shape us and direct our path through life. Yeah, it's really interesting. I, you know, so many times I look back on things and say to myself, listen, if you hadn't been through that, if you hadn't experienced that, you wouldn't be the guy that you are today. You wouldn't be able to say the things that you can say to your son. You wouldn't be able to have the perspective that you have. It was shitty. You went through a lot of shitty things and you had to experience those things. But like you said, you got to put that positive spin on it of at least I have the experience and at least I can pass that on and say, hey, by the way, this happens, I can do that. So I like positive spins on anything. I'm going to wrap everything up. Steve, you got anything else?
I just want to say the way I look at things is perhaps there's going to be somebody down the line who had an experience. They know that I have because I've put it out there publicly. Now they have somebody to talk to. And so for me, that's a positive.
Or at least somebody to listen to.
Or somebody to listen to.
And
I've had a lot of people who have never gone public about anything because they know what I do.
And to have someone to speak with also. We know that from experience.
And I mean, my whole take with all of this and doing this show has always been from the beginning, I put my name on it. Like the things that I do, the things that I say, the things that I talk about on this show are mine. When I talk about my experiences, they're mine. I talk about them so that I can own them, so that other people don't have any power over me. So that being said,
I do want to say one more thing.
Go ahead.
Because of my involvement in this type of field, the UFO, Bigfoot stuff, I actually was able to speak to a Kecksburg UFO witness who nobody knows. And he doesn't want to go public. Right. A guy I used to work with, he's seen the Kecksburg UFO that night. And without me there, he would never have been able to tell anybody, so that's a positive. And that's why I do what I do.
And
at least he got it.
With respect to our incident, I would say that, too, that Melanie and I and some few others, we've never, we may not talk openly at certain times, but we've kept to what happened. We've never altered anything. We've been honest with our reaccounting and what took place, and collectively, she and I and a few others made United States history together. We didn't really mention that this case actually is the first UFO case to be deemed historically true in America, and with 2 citations from the governor, Historical Society. It was researched by Roswell. It might have been a long road, to say the least. But again, at the end of the day, something good came from it.
Yeah.
And so again, I think that I'm grateful to have met Melanie in a roundabout way and talked with her, and like you met Steve, you met somebody from that incident, and it becomes a family, right? I mean, it becomes a family that. Whether maybe it comes a little late in life, but at the end of the day, your family grows because you can connect with certain people over certain things, and you grow stronger, and that's what I would say. A lot of people say to me, if something happens, who would I talk to? Why would I say anything? I think when you bottle things up too long, it affects you just, if not more. You got to get it out. You got to find new friends. You have to find people you connect with, and so for that, I'm grateful to have met Melanie.
And I'm grateful to have met you. Thank you very much, Chris and Steve, for having me.
Very, very welcome. Thank you both for coming on.
Yeah.
This has been the Fortean Slip, episode 150, the Berkshires UFO Incident. If you like this shit, hit the little thumbs up button. If you don't, hit the little thumbs down button. Leave a comment, subscribe. Check out our show over on Anchor. The show will be up tomorrow. I'm still having an issue with getting the download and stripping the audio, so it takes about a day. Everything will be up on Anchor tomorrow. That's anchor.fm/the Fortean Slip. Check out Thom's website. It's ufopark.org. And he has those pictures that we were showing during the show. There's some behind the scenes photos, I believe you said, Thom, of the unsolved mystery stuff there. There's images of the park, and etc. Check out our good friend Dred Funn over at dredfunn.com and youtube.com/Dred Funn. He's done some really cool stuff recently that I've been watching. He's doing a realistic Batman Bane drawing right now that I'm waiting for him to finish up. And as always, check out our good friends over at High Society Radio. That's at gasdigitalnetwork.com and wherever podcasts may be found. We will be back next week with another episode, of which I have no idea what it will be. But we will come up with something. And until then, see